Hello and welcome to my second presentation on problem lists for DPT students at Melbourne University. So I've done cardio separately as we use a different problem list template to neuro and musk. The main difference with the cardio template is that we tend to get all the assessment information and then we determine what the problem is. Even though this is for cardio, you can use this same thought process for the other two core physio areas, so neuro and musk. And this is actually how in my myotherapy undergrad, we learned to work through our differentials to come up with our diagnosis, or our clinical impression as we used to call them. So as I mentioned, the main difference is that we have the assessment and then come up with our problems. So this is a patient that I saw on my first day of my cardio placement, and I saw them almost every day for the best part of 4 weeks before they were discharged. Apart from maybe, I think 3-4 days over a weekend, they were actually back in intensive care. But yeah, for the most part, saw them 4 days a week, 4 weeks, so pretty familiar with them. So this is essentially word for word a patient note from my encounter. Might look like a lot of information, but you'll get used to seeing the notes presented in this same format. And it's how I'd like you to take note. I'd like you to take note of how even within my subjective and my objective, I've grouped information under subheadings. This is a really good habit to get into as it keeps everything organized and makes it much easier to do a handover to someone. Plus, your supervisors are going to expect that you lay it out in this fashion, so it's probably best to do it that way. Okay, so what I've done, this is the same information, but I've just isolated the objective assessment and highlighted the information I'm going to use to develop my problems. Another good thing is to get comfortable with picking out what's relevant and what's not, because obviously if you've got a big chunk of information, easy to get overwhelmed, but just go through piece by piece and just literally do what I've done, just highlight what you think is important. Okay, so I can't remember if you or I were given a table like this anywhere, but if you're getting stuck, it's definitely a really good starting point. Pretty much all you're going to do is pop all the different potential physiotherapy problems into their own columns. And then once you've got your assessments, you're going to go through any that are abnormal or atypical and put them into the column of any problems that may indicate. Okay, so the first thing we're going to chuck in is the quiet breathing sounds. To me, this would indicate low lung volumes. Again, for low lung volumes, we've got the crackling in the right lower zone laterally. That also fits in with impaired airway clearance. And I have a feeling my little clicks are going to come up in the wrong order, but we'll make do. Yeah. So we've got quiet breathing sounds, upper zone bilaterally as impaired gas exchange as well. Obviously, less air in there is less air that can exchange. And anything that's low, decreasing lung volumes is going to decrease the surface area that we're going to have impaired gas exchange on as well. So those two tend to go hand in hand. So crackling in right lower zone laterally also fits with impaired gas exchange. Drainage, obviously if there's fluid coming out of the lungs, that's area that there's no air. That fits in with impaired gas exchange again. Productive cough only after mobilizations to me would indicate low lung volumes potentially. Definitely impaired airway clearance. For decreased mobility, we've got required assist ×1 for a sit to stand. I put an asterisk here as this person was physically capable of doing it, but just because I had all the lines, we had to help them with that. So not super important, a bit wish-washy, but I would still put it in there. So elevated heart rate would indicate low lung volumes to me. So basically that elevated heart rate is compensating for the cardio system or the respiratory system. Again, impaired gas exchange, it's compensatory mechanism. And put it under decreased exercise tolerance as well, as we can hypothesize that if their heart rate is high at resting, they've got less room to move that when they do begin exercising, and that would decrease their exercise tolerance. However, we didn't assess this, so it's sort of theoretical, hypothetical, rather than being true. Obviously, the oxygen requirement would indicate low lung volumes and definitely impaired gas exchange. And again, I've sort of fit that in under decreased exercise tolerance. We can hypothesize that someone with reduced oxygen sats isn't going to have the same tolerance for exercise as someone with sort of normal oxygen sats. And then even though it wasn't in the original case info, this person did have areas of consolidation as well as left lower lobe collapse on their x-ray. So I've added that to the table under low lung volumes, impaired gas exchange, and impaired airway clearance. So as you can see, that low lung volumes ends up with the most atypical findings, or the most asterix signs as we call them. While not always the case, it's a pretty good way to determine the patient's #1 problem. Just keep in mind that you can have a cascading effect of something like delayed mobilization, which we know can then lead to low lung volumes, impaired gas exchange, and impaired airway clearance. So basically, if delayed mobilization comes up, that's probably going to be your #1 problem, even if it's only one thing, and the rest of them are all sort of those first 3 in the columns. So there were some other assessments that I haven't put in the table. Those were the adequate bibasal expansion and marching on the spot for 7 minutes, as I find both of those are typical, so we don't need to include them as our asterisk signs. If there's no information in the notes, you should never presume whether it was or wasn't assessed, but I can say this patient did not report or display any signs of dyspnea, even during marching on the spot, and they didn't have any delay in mobilization. So this one's a bit quicker, a bit shorter than neuro. But again, hopefully this helps, gives you a sort of a starting point that if you do get stuck, you've got something to refer back on. And like the neuro problem lists, it sort of helps you organize your thoughts visually rather than just trying to do it in your head. And once you get good at this, it becomes second nature and you probably won't need the table, but a good one to present back to your supervisor as well in the problem list you'll be doing on placement. Again, any comments or questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll reply to them as best as I can. Thank you.